Hey everyone, Julian Cross here for Topic Lake Insights presents Regulation Rangers, making sense of rules that shape our world. And with me today is Elena Harper, our regulatory guru, to go through all those new rules, fresh from the Federal Register yesterday, January 13th, 2025.
Oh my goodness.
We got executive orders, we're talking pesticides, adjustments for inflation, clean energy credits, we even have retirement plan tweaks. Elena, what really jumps out at you from this regulatory buffet?
Well, you know what's so interesting to me is just the variety, Julian. It just goes to show you that government regulations touch just about every aspect of our lives. You know, everything from what we eat, like the tuna on our plates, to how we plan for the future, like those retirement savings.
Yeah, you don't always think about it, but these rules really are the gears that keep everything moving. Let's start with the Commerce Department, specifically NOAA, the folks who manage our oceans. They've put out a temporary rule about Atlantic bluefin tuna fishing quotas.
Yes, and this one's interesting because it involves shifting 20.5 metric tons of bluefin tuna quota from later in the year to the January through March period.
Okay.
Now you might think, okay, so they're moving some numbers around.
Right.
But this actually could have a big impact on things like fishing businesses, seafood prices, and even those international trade agreements.
Wow, it's all connected, isn't it? It's like the butterfly effect.
You say.
All right, moving on to Homeland Security. We've got a couple of proposed rules that caught my eye.
Yes, indeed. The first one has to do with export manifests for rail cargo. Basically, they're proposing to make electronic filing mandatory.
Oh.
This could streamline the process, but it also brings up some questions about data security and what it would mean for those smaller businesses.
Yeah, definitely. And then there's the proposed amendment to the Privacy Act of 1974.
Right. This one's all about aligning with the Social Security Number Fraud Prevention Act of 2017. They're really taking a close look at when it is really necessary to include Social Security numbers on physical mail, and how to protect that info better. It's a tough balance between security and privacy.
For sure. All right, let's move on over to the Department of the Interior. We've got 3 final rules to cover there.
First up, Julian, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management is adjusting civil penalties for inflation. This applies to violations of the Outer Continental, Shelf Lands Act, and the Oil Pollution Act.
That's right.
So those fines just went up a bit.
Makes sense. Everything's more expensive these days. What else is happening at Interior?
Well, the National Park Service has revised some special regulations for Glen Canyon National Recreation Area. They're updating the rules on motor vehicle use both on and off those designated roads. This is about trying to find that balance between letting people enjoy the park and protecting the environment.
It's always a tough one. And finally, from Interior, we have the II Surface Mining Reclamation and Enforcement Office. What have they been working on?
They're approving an amendment to the Wyoming Regulatory Program, Julian. It's an interesting one. Wyoming wants to allow the disposal of inert, non-hazardous wind turbine blades and towers in surface coal mining operations.
Oh, interesting.
It's kind of a blend of old and new energy industries. And they're also using this opportunity to clean up their rule book a bit, making it consistent with the Wyoming Secretary of State's rules on rules. And they're fixing some grammar errors, too.
So even in the world of regulation, there's room for spring cleaning. Up next, the Department of Labor.
Oh, they've ratified 2 rules, Julian. Both of them are about the H-2A visa program. That program that lets agricultural employers hire foreign workers when they can't find enough American workers. Yep. One of the rules actually goes back to 2010, and the other one's for 2022. So these ratifications are basically like formally acknowledging these existing rules.
Gotcha. So kind of a housekeeping measure for the Department of Labor. Now let's head to the top. The Executive Office of the President. They've been busy.
Very busy. We've got a bunch of executive orders dealing with succession planning. These orders spell out who steps up if a key leader in a department can't serve. We're talking agriculture, Homeland Security, Justice, Treasury, and a couple of others.
It's like that designated survivor thing they do during the State of the Union. Right?
Yeah,
Every single day.
Makes sense, though. You always need a plan B.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And on top of those executive orders, we also have several presidential memorandums that are designating acting officials for different agencies.
So it's like putting in the bench warmers just in case.
You got it. It ensures that everything keeps running smoothly.
Makes sense. Okay, this next one's pretty interesting, it looks like. There's a presidential document about the possible acquisition of the United States Steel Corporation. by Nippon Steel Corporation.
Oh, wow.
This could be huge for the industry.
Right. This proposed merger is going to raise a lot of questions about competition, about who controls the market and what the future holds for the U.S. steel industry. It'll be interesting to see how this unfolds.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of industries, let's go to the EPA. Always a busy place for regulations. They've got a whole bunch of proposed rules about pesticide petitions.
Oh, yeah, I saw those. Lots of really long chemical names I can't even pronounce. But those petitions are basically asking the EPA to make some new regulations for pesticide residues, or we change the ones that are already there.
Right. They're looking at things like bifenthrin and permethrin and trichopyr, all those chemicals they use in agriculture and pest control. The EPA has to look at the good things about those chemicals, but also the risks, the risks for people's health and the environment. It's a complicated process with a lot of people involved.
It is. All right, next up, the Federal Reserve. The people who control all that money, what are they doing?
Well, they're adjusting for inflation too, Julian. Yeah. This time it's about those civil money penalties for breaking your rules. The Federal Civil Penalties Inflation Adjustment Act, Improvements Act of 2015 says they have to do it. So it's not really a surprise.
Makes sense. Got to keep things consistent. So what's next?
The National Foundation on the Arts and the Humanities is doing the same thing. They're adjusting their maximum civil penalties because of inflation. This applies to violations of the program fraud, Civil Remedies Act, and the NEA's restrictions on lobbying.
So basically, even if you're breaking the rules, inflation is still going to get you. All right, let's talk taxes.
Yeah.
The IRS has issued a final rule, and it's all about clean energy.
This is an interesting one, Julian. It puts into action a program from the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. This program gives extra tax credits for clean electricity projects, and these projects have to be in low-income communities. It's all part of what the Biden administration wants to do with clean energy and environmental justice.
So you get tax breaks for going green and helping people in need. Sounds like everyone wins. That's the idea. And the IRS has also put out a proposed rule that could affect retirement plans.
Oh, yes. This is the one about catch-up contributions. That's right. It gives some guidelines for those retirement plans that let people 50 and older put in those extra contributions. They're updating the rules to line up with the Secure 2.0 Act of 2022. So anyone thinking about retirement or already in retirement should keep an eye on this one.
Good to know.
Oh.
Okay, now we're on to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. We call them CMS for short. What have they been working on?
Well, they're issuing a correction, Julian. It seems like there were some technical and typographical errors in a rule they published back in November. It was about hospital outpatient prospective payment and ambulatory services.
Oops. Well, good thing they caught it.
Yeah.
Accuracy is really important when it comes to healthcare. Those mistakes could really affect hospitals and doctors and, of course, the patients.
Oh, absolutely. Last but not least, we have the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. Those are the folks who keep an eye on Wall Street.
Watchdog.
Exactly. And they're tightening things up a bit. They've issued a final rule that changes. The broker-dealer customer protection rule. It says that certain broker-dealers have to calculate their reserves and make their required deposits every day instead of every week.
So it's like more frequent checkups to make sure everything is running smoothly. Probably a good idea after all the financial craziness we've seen in recent years.
Definitely. It's all about protecting investors and keeping the financial market stable. Yeah, it really is a jungle out there.
It really is. Well, that wraps it up for today's roundup of all those new rules and regs. Thanks for joining us, Elena.
Always a pleasure, Julian. I love geeking out about regulations with you.
And for all of you listening out there, if you want to keep up on the latest rules and regs or take a deeper look at anything we talked about today, just head over to www.topiclake.com to stay up to date.